Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 258. Joined for the first time by both Jacob Kamaker and Kenny Ortiz. First, Jacob Kamaker from NBC Sports Boston. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad all three of us are together, giving the three-man booth a shot, see what comes out of it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be better than the ESPN three-man booth they've had in recent years. Also joined by Kenny Ortiz at Fantasy Jabber, the vice president. Kenny, how are you? And hopefully it's not too cold in Minnesota.
I know. I actually warmed up today. It was like 18 degrees. I mean, it was hot.
Wow. It was pretty warm here. You'll be jealous. It was like 45 here, I think, today. It's kind of weird that I'm the southernmost person on this podcast. It's not usual that a Philadelphia guy will be basking in the heat of January, but
it's so hot. I cracked out a Corona Light. You know, it's
very nice, very nice.
For those of you watching on YouTube,
kind of jealous there. All right, so we had two games, both favorites won and covered. I don't know if we're allowed to say that with Kenny on the air, but let's start with the first game. The Chiefs against the Titans. Chiefs were down early. They came back. And they won pretty easily at the end. So and thoughts on that game? What are the major takeaways?
I think my big takeaway is the Chiefs, even after getting down early for the second straight game, still were able to make a comeback with Patrick Mahomes. That offense is just so dynamic. And, you know, it doesn't matter how much they're down by. They can come back from 24 down like they did against the Texans, even with Tennessee controlling the clock early in that one and really getting their, run game going. They were able to finally slow down Derrick Henry and force Ryan Tannehill to make plays. So their defense has enough talent, but I just think that offense is so hard to stop. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. He probably will continue to be the best quarterback in the NFL for a long, long time if he keeps going at this rate and doesn't get hurt. So as long as he's on the field for them, Kansas City is a dangerous, dangerous team.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, me and Walt were talking, man, and I said I thought Deshaun Watson was the best quarterback in the NFL. I said it was close, but I gave Deshaun an edge. I was wrong. Mahomes, dude, this guy does things. You're just like, he plays so free and so loose. He reminds me of Michael Vick, except just way better. Like everything, but remember, like Michael Vick, he was kind of the first quarterback. Randall played that way. I mean, Vince Young played that way. Just kind of that real loose, like he's out playing ball. Like he's in the backyard with a bunch of friends where it's like Thanksgiving morning and he's just running around. Like that's what it feels like. He's not like an NFL quarterback. He's just a dude having fun who can just do it better than everyone else out there. And it's entertaining to watch. Like it makes you want to root for him because he's just so freaking fun to watch. Like, I love it. So I was wrong. Patrick Mahomes, as you said, Jacob, he's number one and will be for a long time. Quick stat that everyone needs to know. The Detroit Tigers of Major League Baseball have now drafted more Super Bowl quarterbacks than the Detroit Lions.
That is amazing.
Unreal.
Leave it to the Lions to have that stat. That's embarrassing.
No, the Tigers drafted Mahomes, a couple years ago to play baseball.
Yeah, what's crazy about Mahomes is that the Super Bowl is only going to be his 35th start, I believe. Like that, he's so young and he's just going to get better. Like, can you imagine him in 3 years if Andy Reid is still there? Like, he's just going to keep getting better, and I don't think it's even close. Like, I saw on Twitter, like when he scored that touchdown, someone asked, "Is Patrick Mahomes the best quarterback in the NFL?" I'm like, is it even a question at this point? Like, he's so good, he's so much better than everyone else. Actually, it made me wonder, like, who's the second best quarterback in the NFL? And like people will say Lamar Jackson, and he had a great year for sure. I don't know if I'd put Lamar Jackson there. Like my vote for that would be Russell Wilson. I liked the Deshaun Watson commentary you had last week, Kenny. I think Watson certainly he's definitely in the top 5. He might be number 2, but I like Wilson. Any thoughts on like who the second best quarterback is?
I think I would also take Wilson just because he's proven to be successful for so long, and he's still in his prime too. Like, you could always make the case that a guy like, Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees is still at the top of his game, but I think where Russell Wilson's like really still in his prime, he'd be my pick for number 2.
Yeah, I think it's really close to me for number 2, but it's Wilson, Watson, and then I think there's a pretty significant drop to the Rodgers, Brees of the world, and I think maybe I'm crazy. I don't think Lamar Jackson is. I mean, that system is great. He still has to me, he really struggles passing the ball down the field still. He had a great year, and don't want to take that away from him, but I don't know. There's several guys that take ahead of him. People may think I'm biased. I'm taking Carson Wentz ahead of Lamar Jackson still. So I don't know. To me, Jackson's like 7 or 8, maybe. I mean, he's pretty low on my list. Maybe people think I'm crazy.
I don't think you're crazy. I think Wentz certainly is up there, and Lamar Jackson. Like, people talk about how he just doesn't have the receiving talent, and like he has some good players, like Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. They're both good players, yeah. But something people ignore when kind of defending Lamar Jackson and his performance in the playoffs is that he has an elite offensive line in front of him. Like that, the Baltimore offensive line is great, and plus their defense is good too. So he hasn't had to do all that much in the regular season, although he did a lot. Obviously, he's going to be MVP for a reason. Whereas like Russell Wilson just had no offensive line. Like Seattle's offensive line in the past several seasons just atrocious. The same thing with the Texans. Like they've had no offensive line either. So like those, like I wonder how well Wilson and Watson would play if they had great blocking in front of them. And hopefully they can get it this offseason. But I don't. Well, first of all, I don't have any faith in Bill O'Brien to do that, and he's running the show in Houston. Seattle, I have more faith in, but the fact that they haven't really addressed their offensive line in so long, it's just I don't know, and it's a shame that they're just not living up to their potential.
Yeah, hey, credit to Bill O'Brien. He traded way too many resources for Laramie Tunsil and then drafted a 3rd-round offensive tackle in Titus Howard in the 1st round. So he's trying, but he's not succeeding. So I think that's the most Bill O'Brien thing ever, to be like, all right, I finally have to address this weakness, and I'm going to go about doing it in a way that makes minimal sense all around. But yeah, if either of those guys played behind great offensive lines, I think they'd be better. I might be a little higher on Lamar Jackson than both of you guys, but the big thing for me is that he's had one really, really great year as a starter. We saw in his rookie year, he barely threw the ball. So it's kind of hard to put much stock into that. He may make like more improvement and really start to remind us all a little bit more of Michael Vick like he did at times last year. But it's definitely too early to put him in like the top 5 of quarterbacks. If we're talking about potential, he probably ranks top 5. But if we're talking about production, results, and just, overall skill set, I think he's outside the top 5 for now. He may overtake those Rodgers and Breezes of the world and Brady, in the coming years. But I think we need to see him repeat his success.
Do you guys think Lamar Jackson's, I mean, my concern for him, talent aside, is can he sustain this from not getting injured? Like the amount of running, the way they run that offense, is it plausible? This guy coached 10 years without 2 ACL tears or without major injuries. I mean, that's my concern for this guy.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing. We've seen that with Russian quarterbacks in the past, like Robert Griffin. He suffered the knee injury, so he regressed. Vince Young, I don't think he got hurt necessarily, but he made the Pro Bowl this first year. He got into the playoffs the second year, and then he kind of fell off. The thing I'll say about Lamar Jackson is that, like, unlike Robert Griffin, who kind of he's kind of known for not really putting a lot of work ethic into watching film and whatnot, and same thing with Vince Young. Lamar Jackson actually, like, he really works like very hard, and like that's something I think he has going for him. So I don't think he's going to regress like the other guys, but you're right that like he needs to improve his passing, because the rushing is going to get worse every year, whereas the passing has to match that going upward.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, you also have to pick and choose when to fight for the extra yardage and when not to. Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson are very, very good at this. We saw Mahomes in the AFC Championship game with that incredible touchdown run where he looked literally he looked like Derrick Henry close to the goal line, crunching over a couple guys. Mahomes is obviously a little bit bigger than Lamar just because he's been in the league a little bit longer, the strength and conditioning program, and he's just bigger in general. But Russell Wilson, I think, is probably the best example of he knows when to run the ball. He knows when to get rid of it. He knows how to slide and avoid contact. So he hasn't suffered any major injuries. Lamar Jackson's going to need to learn how to do that because he has the athleticism and running ability needed to be a dynamic playmaker. But like you said, Kenny, the injury avoidance is going to be huge because all it takes is one, significant injury to sap a little bit of that athleticism.
Yep.
And then, we're talking about, all right, he's not quite as athletic. How's his passing game? Where are we at there? So that'll be his biggest thing moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we go from the young quarterbacks to kind of like the old guys. So like in the second game, Aaron Rodgers, he posted some nice stats at the end, but it kind of wasn't really indicative of how he played. He had that horrible interception in the first half that gave the 49ers the touchdown. He also botched a snap from center when he was near field goal range, probably in field goal range. So there's like a 10-point swing. So where do you think, where's Aaron Rodgers go from here? He's going to be 36, or I think he actually is 36. It's been almost a decade since he went to the Super Bowl. He hasn't gone back since. Wow. It's been a long time, and now he's approaching 40. How many more years does he have left? And are we just going to see a decline going forward?
I think he's got a few years left in the tank because he still clearly has that arm talent. I think the Packers need to get him some more receiving weapons because pretty much it was all Devontae Adams last year. Jimmy Graham is a shell of himself. Sternberger needs a lot more time to improve at the NFL level, and just no one stepped up as the number 2 guy. Alan Lazard had some nice games, but he wasn't consistent. And then we're talking about Jake Kumaro and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and those guys really didn't do much. I will say the one thing that bothered me most about that championship game is when Rodgers botched that snap. He didn't do anything after that ball hit the ground. He just kind of stood there, and I was like, oh, his center must have fallen on it. And then it was like, no, it was recovered by the defense. And I was like, why is he just letting the ball go then? I don't know. It was kind of a big game and huge momentum swing there. I don't get why he didn't fight for the ball. I know he's like you said, he's 36, but maybe he didn't want to avoid injury, but it's kind of like you're in the NFC title game. You probably should give full effort on everything. Maybe I'm just nitpicking a little bit too much, but I still think Rodgers has the talent. I think if they upgrade his supporting cast a little bit, we'll see a bit of a bounce back. But yeah, he's definitely running out of time. The fact that he hasn't gotten back to the Super Bowl in 10 years is a massive concern. And it also does not feel like it's been 10 years to me since he was in there, but time flies.
I got it. On one part of me feels bad for Aaron Rodgers, and the other part of me is like, brother, this is on you. There are moments. I get it. You're 100% right, Jake. The receiving core is not what it should be, and the defense has really been very inconsistent for the last decade. But ultimately, and McCarthy has been his coach, and people who have listened to the pod know I'm an anti-McCarthy, right? So I totally. But there have been moments where Aaron Rodgers had a chance to do things over the last couple of years, and he really just him. And I don't know that they would have won this game anyway, but there were moments in this game where I feel like it's just like, okay, brother, it's on you to put the team on your back. And I just feel like there were a few passes he didn't make, or a few moments where it's like, hey man, you can't throw that pick. You just can't do that in the NFC title game. You just not against that defense on the road. You just can't. It's unforgivable. And so at the end of the day, it's partially self-inflicted. There's been other circumstances, but I'm also really bitter at Aaron Rodgers because I had 150 lineups with Aaron Rodgers in it in different DFS contests. So I'm just a little angry and bitter, little confirmation bias, anti Aaron Rodgers coming out. And none of those lineups cashed, but I did have a lot of Raheem Mostert and those lineups cashed. So anyway, thanks, A-Rod. No, but I think you guys are right. I think at the end of the day, I don't see him going back at all. I think the NFC, Roger or a Brees and Wilson are not going anywhere. They still have a year or two left, it seems like, or Brees 1 or 2, and Wilson's got several years to come. I think the NFC has a couple good, young guys, Carson Wentz being amongst them. And then on the AFC, oh my gosh, it's loaded with young quarterbacks. Even if Rodgers could get back, could he beat a Mahomes or a Watson in the Super Bowl? I don't think so. Not likely, I don't think. So, yeah, unless they significantly upgrade the offense, I think this is kind of the last hurrah. I think Rodgers probably loses in the first or second round of the playoffs every year for the rest of his career. And I think we said this last week, Walt. I think we'll be looking back as Aaron Rodgers' career as what could have been or what should have been.
Yeah, he's had a lot of injuries over the years, and that's been part of the problem. It's why he hasn't gone back. And I always thought that if he could stay healthy for an entire year, that he'd be able to win a championship. And they got close this year. Granted, I don't think they were the second best team in the NFC. I still think the Saints were up there, and I think we were robbed of a very good NFC championship, kind of like a rematch of what we saw earlier in the year with the 49ers and the Saints. I wanted to see that rematch. This one was not even close. And it was so embarrassing that the 49ers only had to throw the ball 8 times. Can you remember something like that? I mean, I've heard stories about Terry Bradshaw in the 70s. None of us were alive for that.
70s, more like the 40s.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I don't know if the 49ers can sustain this. They barely thrown the ball in the playoffs. I don't know if they can win that way in the Super Bowl, or maybe I'm wrong. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but any thoughts on the Niners in that game and in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, my big takeaway is the fact that they're just such a ground dominant team, and they have not run into a team that could stop them yet. But it's worth noting that they've played the Packers defense, which, like you said, Kenny, has been inconsistent all year, and their biggest weakness is against the run. So I'm not reading too much into their performance against them. They did well against the Vikings. That was somewhat impressive, I thought, because I think the Vikings have a better, at least front seven, than the Packers do. But I don't know if they continue this against the Chiefs. I mean, we saw the Chiefs slow down Derrick Henry, which no other team in the AFC had been able to do up to this point. Not just in the playoffs, but towards the end of the season. So I think if the Chiefs can slow down Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman's hurt. We don't know if he's going to play. But if they can find a way to slow down Mostert and really force Jimmy Garoppolo to have to make some pressure plays, which he hasn't had to do in this postseason, I think we could see the Chiefs really, take control of that Super Bowl. I still think it'll be close because the Niners have such a great defense and their offense is really well balanced, and Jimmy G does have some talent, but I find it hard to imagine that the Niners are going to be able to run all over the Chiefs, and that if they can't do that, that Garoppolo is going to have no trouble throwing on the Chiefs, because I think that's just unrealistic.
Yeah, I think you said it 100%. Maybe I'm crazy. I think the Chiefs are going to win this game, and I think they'll easily cover this game. I don't think that the Niners are going to be able to hang with them. I think I know the defense is good on the Niners side. I think the Chiefs are going to score 30 points in this game. I don't see them not scoring. The way Patrick Mahomes is playing right now, I don't care what defense is out there. That team is scoring 30 points. Can Jimmy G do that? And the Chiefs defense is not great, but can he really in this game score 30 plus and go toe to toe? I mean, I remember 2 years ago, many people would have said Nick Foles couldn't do it. So maybe Jimmy G can. I would say Jimmy G is probably better than Nicky Franchise. Heresy.
Whoa. Right. How dare you say that?
Yeah. I mean, literally, dude. Yeah, I mean, I said it jokingly. When was the last time a team won a playoff game throwing 8 times? I don't even know. I mean, literally the 40s. I mean, like the 50s. Like when I think high school teams in the Philadelphia Public League throw more than 8 times. I mean, it's absurd. There's no way they can do that again. I think the Packers were kind of a fraud squad. I picked them to win. I thought they were going to win. I was 100% wrong, obviously, and that defense showed me that I was wrong. And so they're not nearly as good as I thought they were. So I think the Chiefs are going to be a much better opponent, and I would imagine that the Chiefs are going to win this game. And I'm afraid I'm rooting for them. I love Andy Reid. He was in Philadelphia for a long time. I give him a big thumbs up. I got a Chiefs gear. I got a Chiefs t-shirt because I used to date a girl from Kansas City, and she forced me to wear it. But I'm going to wear it gladly on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, I think Coach Conway has won some games with throwing the ball 3 times as our high school coach. It is weird to have that happen, and I think Bradshaw did it. I think Bradshaw threw the ball only 7 times in one game or something like that. But it has happened before, but it's so rare. So for the Super Bowl, my first instinct was that, we've seen this formula before where a great front seven or a great defensive line is going up against a quarterback, kind of like the Giants Patriots Super Bowl back in 2007, where the Patriots were this juggernaut offensively. But they were limited in the Super Bowl because the Giants put pressure on Brady with only 4 guys, and they were able to play man underneath. So that kind of made me think, first thought that the 49ers would do the same thing. They'd slow down Mahomes because Mahomes would see a lot of pressure. But I think the difference there, and like I don't want to downplay Brady or anything. Obviously, he's the greatest quarterback of all time. The difference between Brady and Mahomes is that Mahomes can escape the pressure and he'll be able to run for some first downs. And I think that'll tire the 49ers out a little bit. So I kind of agree with you, Kenny. I think I'm leaning toward the Chiefs to win this game. I'm not 100% there yet, and next week we'll have a definitive pick. We'll go into more depth, but I'm leaning toward the Chiefs right now. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm also leaning toward the Chiefs. I just think they have everything going for them right now, and I just don't see a way that the 49ers can compete. I know Chris here is saying the 49ers did win a shootout with the Saints earlier in the year, and that was definitely impressive for their offense. But I'm just not sure if Jimmy G will be able to do that in a big pressure moment like this. Maybe he will. He might prove us wrong. But I think also you mentioned the Super Bowl with the Super Bowl I don't want to talk about. The 2007 Patriots-Giants Super Bowl. I think that might be the hardest I've cried ever in my life. I was like 10 and they lost. So, yeah, I don't want to talk about that one. But I'll talk about the Seahawks versus Denver Super Bowl when Denver had that really great offense and Seattle had that great defense. Again, the Seattle defensive line gave Peyton Manning fits in that game, but Peyton Manning couldn't move. So you have a really great defensive line, but if you have a quarterback that can move, they can get the job done. And Denver that year, I can't remember if that was the year they had a really good defense, but they had some talent, Von Miller on that defensive line against the Seahawks, but Russell Wilson negated that by being able to scramble pretty much. So I think we'll see a little bit of that from Mahomes. I just think he's such a dynamic playmaker, and I'm a huge Andy Reid fan too, mostly because he and I share a nickname in Big Red, and it's very easy for me to dress up as him on Halloween. And I feel like he deserves a Super Bowl title. I really think he does. Not that the 49ers don't, but Andy's put in so much work over the years, and he always comes up just short. And I just think this is his year. This is his time.
Think about the Andy coaching tree too. Like so many teams, not just head coaches, but offensive coordinators and assistants. Like it feels like half the league, maybe, or maybe right at half the league has either a head coach or coordinator or a GM, someone who's like a, vice president of football operations who was mentored under Andy Reid, either in Philadelphia or in Kansas City. He really is like the Bill Walsh of this era, minus the Super Bowls, which I know is a big minus, obviously. But it's significant. Like, even if he had won one, like if he had won the 2004 Super Bowl with the Eagles, or if he had, if D4 doesn't jump off, isn't 4 inches offsides last year. And, if they go, and there's no doubt in my mind, the Chiefs beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. And so it's like, if that had been the case, like if he has one Super Bowl title, I think we have a very, very different view of Andy Reid. I think so. And I think the narrative is very different.
Yeah, that's been his bugaboo, is kind of like deep in the playoffs. Is he's been known to choke. Although I think some people would say Donovan McNabb kind of choked in that game, like he literally did. But that's the one thing missing for Andy Reid's resume. Is like he's taken 2 teams to Super Bowls now, but he hasn't won the big game, and I hope he does. And people will say that, he might choke in this game, but then I could point to people said Peyton Manning couldn't win the big one, and then he did. And then and in a different sport, Phil Mickelson always choked, and then he won like the Masters. So I do think this is Andy Reid's time. And one thing I'll say about Andy Reid is that I feel like in the NFC Championship, to go back to that, I think Kyle Shanahan really outcoached Matt LaFleur. I don't think Andy Reid is going to be outcoached, especially with having 2 weeks to prepare. And we know how great Andy Reid is with extra time. So I think that's going to be a big boost for Andy Reid as well. And looks like Jacob, your dad says you cried more when Antoine Walker was traded. I want to relive that for a second.
He is right about that. I was 6 years old and he just picked me up from kindergarten or first grade, whatever I was in at the time. And he knew I was going to flip out because I'm a huge Celtics fan. They're my favorite team by far in any sport. And he's like, they made a trade today and they told me who he traded for. And then I was like, who did they trade away? And he's like, Antoine Walker. I flipped my lid. I was crying. And he was dropping me off to my mom at her preschool. And he carried me in crying. And all of her teacher friends were like, is he okay? And they were like, what happened? he was like, "Oh, Antoine Walker got traded." So there's still many people who see me and remember that. So anytime Antoine's name comes up, they'll be like, "I remember you crying over Antoine Walker." So there's your story about 2 of the times I've cried from sports as a child.
Your dad is like a very comforting man, though. I mean, he's consoling you and helping you through this. It's a very nurturing father. That's a good dad.
Very true. I do have a good dad. Shout out. He always listens to our show. So shout out. Thank you for listening, Dad. Thank you for listening, Mom, too. I know you're probably listening as well.
Yeah, and I know my mom listens as well because she's talking about how Kenny always mentions Jackie. So we'll get to see. We'll see if Jackie's mentioned maybe as someone who might be better than Jason Garrett, who's hired by the Giants to be their offensive coordinator. So we have some other topics to discuss as well. We're going to delve more into the Super Bowl next week. Jacob and I will do against the spread picking and maybe some props as well. And then Kenny and I will build DraftKings lineup or 2 with the game. And DraftKings has $1 million contest. So I should mention that we are sponsored by DraftKings. So you can go to DraftKings.com, enter in promo code Walter Football. That's one word, Walter Football, for a bonus to your first deposit. I almost forgot to mention that. So I'm glad I remembered. And I should also mention that please hit the subscribe button. That would help a lot. And also the like button, or maybe the dislike button if you dislike us. So, and I don't know why you'd be listening if you dislike us, but hey, if you want to do it, I'm fine with it. Anyway, speaking of Jason Garrett, thoughts on him being the offensive coordinator for the Giants now?
I mean, there's a part of me that's like, good on Joe Judge bringing someone with coaching experience, but then I'm like, Jason Garrett's not very good. He doesn't make many adjustments in game. It's just kind of an uninspiring hire, and we knew the Giants were interested in Jason Garrett, so I wonder if Joe Judge even had his hand forced and was like, the Giants really wanted him to bring him in, and Judge was kind of like, hey, like, yeah, I guess I can do that. We'll give this a shot. But I just thought it was pretty uninspiring. I was high on Joe Judge as a coaching candidate because of the programs he comes from with Alabama and New England, just knowing how to build a winner. Hiring Garrett does not feel like a winning move as offensive coordinator. I would have been fine if they brought him in as like an assistant head coach who also like did a position, and then they had another younger offensive coordinator to call plays, because then you get Garrett at least mentoring, and at least, you know, he has some knowledge of running a team, even if he wasn't very good at it. That can be at least partially helpful. But I wasn't a big fan of this, and it makes me a little bit worried about what we're going to see out of Daniel Jones this upcoming year.
I am, as an Eagles fan, I love this move. I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, I don't think I can add anything, Jake. I mean, you said uninspiring. I think that's the perfect word for it. It's so underwhelming, right? Like that's the nature. I mean, I feel like I'm at Walt's house and he just gave me a natty ice, and I'm like, come on, man, give me a real one. You know, Walt used to throw these parties 10 years ago and used to serve natty ice. And anyway.
Whoa, what is the smear of my parties? I've never served natty ice ever. Maybe like I've had Bud Light and Miller Light. Never natty ice.
Okay, sorry. Different party, I must admit. I'm sorry. I mean, like, it just feels like, oh, I feel like someone's talking up dinner, you know, and you go to dinner and then like, oh, here's some like bagels with cream cheese. You're like, I thought I was having dinner. I thought I was having steak. Nah, it's a bagel with cream cheese, and you eat it. Like, it tastes fine, but I really need steak. Like, I feel like that's what Jason Garrett is. Like, it's just sort of uninspiring. It's underwhelming. Well, I don't understand this at all. And I don't know much about Judge. I don't know what kind of coach he's going to be, obviously. He seems young. It seems like, man, I questioned the move at the beginning. I'm like, did it feel like maybe he's a couple years away still from being a good head coaching, you know, candidate? Maybe I'm wrong. But this is like, even like, that kind of just amplifies, like, yeah, what you want to give a guy is a good previous head coach. You know, the Eagles did that with Jim Schwartz, you know, for Doug Peterson. Lots of guys have done that. Lots of teams have done that. But Jason Garrett doesn't feel like he brings to the table the thing. Like, do you really want him being mentored how to be a head coach from Jason Garrett? Like, really? Like, is that the guy you want to be like, I don't know. Like, if I ever get married, do I want a guy who's been divorced 6 times mentoring me how to be a good husband? No, I don't. Like, I don't think that's wise. Like, I don't. Sorry, apologies to anyone who's been divorced 6 times.
Yeah, sure. There are a couple people out there listening. It struck me as odd that they were interviewing Jason Garrett, kind of like even before they hired the head coach, and like it was like, are they interviewing him to be the head coach or the coordinator, and then they hired Judge, but they're still interviewing Garrett, and it's like, isn't Judge supposed to be deciding this? Like, I thought it was very puzzling. If I were Judge, like I would have hired O'Shea to be the offensive coordinator, because he did such a great job with the Dolphins and already being with the Patriots. I thought that would have been a great hire. Whereas Jason Garrett, wasn't he removed from play calling duties in Dallas? Like, and now he's going to be calling the plays with the Giants. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. One thing I will say though is that, like, if they want to move him to the male cheerleader position, like, they could do that because he can clap very well. I think that's definitely a plus for him.
By the way, I would have gone Jay Gruden. I think Jay Gruden would have been the guy if I were the Giants, one of the higher. I don't think he was a great head coach, but I think he's a much better offensive mind than Jason Garrett.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Gruden was not a good head coach. One of the other teams I cover, in addition to the Patriots, is the Redskins. So I got to witness a lot of Jay Gruden falling flat on his face. But he was a good offensive coordinator before he took the head coaching position. I don't think we can necessarily say the same about Garrett because we've seen him call plays more recently. I think Gruden would have been a much better addition. I also would have personally liked O'Shea more, just because of the great work he did with the Dolphins and how much success they found in the red zone with him. I think they were like 8th best in the NFL after a certain point in the season. So with that skeleton crew, imagine what he could do with the Giants if they add some weapons to that offense. But I think we all agree Garrett was not the right choice for this.
No, it was a great choice. It was a great. I love it.
Right. For Eagles fans, a great choice.
I thought he'd take a year off to kind of reduce the calluses on his hands from clapping so much, but it's going to be treacherous going forward. I don't know. But speaking of the Giants, I didn't even hear this news. Eli Manning. So Chris BS. Eli Manning is going to announce his retirement on Friday. Do you think he makes the Pro Bowl? What do you guys think?
The Hall of Fame.
I mean, the Hall of Fame. Sorry, I'm a little tired.
It's okay. I was actually asleep when this news hit at like 3:30 today. So that's the only reason I'm not tired. But yeah, this is a really good question. Because in my book, like, I don't know if Eli should necessarily make the Hall of Fame. He has the 2 Super Bowl wins, which is like his main calling card. His statistical achievements over the course of the years haven't been great. I know there's some recency bias with that because he's performed so poorly the last couple of seasons. I know he was better in his prime for sure. But I never felt like he was a surefire, like top 5 quarterback in the league, maybe not even a surefire top 10 quarterback at times. I think he's overrated. I think that he ultimately will get into the Hall of Fame. I'm just not sure that he should. Like, I'm very torn on his candidacy. Like, I get the whole multiple Super Bowl things. It's not something a lot of quarterbacks can do. But I feel like his defense has really helped him those years. And, the lack of sustained playoff worthy teams and success that he had late in his career makes me maybe not want to pick him. But I don't know what you guys think.
Jacob, I'm going to agree with you, but I'm going to be more passionate on both sides. I think he absolutely should not be in the Hall of Fame, and I think he absolutely will end up in the Hall of Fame. I've heard a lot of broadcasters and guys who beat writers for different teams, guys who have votes that have said things like, oh yeah, he's definitely a Hall of Famer. And I'm what? Like, I've heard guys on ESPN, I've heard guys from newspaper, like beat writers that make those kind of comments. I'm like, some of you guys actually are the decision makers. And I think there's a significant number of those guys that think he definitely belongs in. So I don't think he belongs in. There's not a chance. You said, like, you're not sure he was ever a top 5, top 10. I would be willing to bet there's only 1 year, once in his entire career, where I think he was a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And that was in the 2008 season. And that was after they won the Super Bowl. And that was when they lost in the second round of the playoffs to the Eagles, who were who limped into the playoffs with 9 wins. And they lost, in the second round to the Eagles at home when they were the number 1 seed. And the Eagles were the 6th seed. So, like, I ultimately, like, no, like it. And I know this is big. It's a big statement to say take away the Super Bowls. Like, if you take away those 2 postseasons and you just look at his regular seasons and you look at the rest of his postseason, he's not even like not only you would say he's barely mediocre. Like, is he in the top half of quarterbacks to ever play would be the question, let alone in the top all. Like he is only on those, and he had a great run. I don't want to take it away from him. Like, he's phenomenal. He beat in the Super Bowl, we don't want to speak of, and then again a couple years later. I mean, he went toe to toe with Brady, and he played great in those games, but he also got really lucky along the way. Right, he got really lucky. Right? If Asante Samuel catches a ball that goes through his hands, Brady's got 7 Super Bowl rings, right, and not 6. If David Tyree doesn't catch a crazy freak ball against his head, Brady's got 8 rings instead of 6. Like, I mean, this idea that Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer is so ridiculous. It's so absurd to me. But I think it's going to happen. I think there's a lot of people who think he's in, and I think it's absurd.
Yeah, I think he's going to get in for sure. I totally agree, Kenny. Like he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. He had a couple of great seasons, but otherwise he's been very mediocre throughout his entire career. And even in those 2 Super Bowl wins, he scored 21 and 17 points. It's like not exactly like he wasn't even as good as Nick Foles was, or not nearly as good. Like Nick Foles actually outscored Tom Brady, whereas in the 2 Super Bowls that the Eli won, it was really his defense like dominating the Patriots offensive line and really making Brady struggle. And then Manning, to his credit, he had a couple of great plays in that game. Obviously he needed some help from David Tyree in that one instance, but he just, like, even in his big moments, he wasn't even that great. So it's like how does this guy get into the Hall of Fame? I certainly would not vote him in, but I think there's enough people backing him for him to get in. And I actually wonder if his name were like Eli Jones or Eli Williams and he wasn't in the Manning family, like, would he be in? Like, what do you guys think about that?
I agree with that. I think if he wasn't a Manning, the case for him being in would certainly be lessened. And Kenny, your rant about that, spot on. That's exactly how I feel. You took it to the right extremes, and I can absolutely get behind that push. But yeah, I know if Eli was like Eli Woods or something, like we wouldn't be talking about him as a potential Hall of Famer. We'd be talking about him as a guy who had a decent career and 2 really amazing playoff runs.
Yeah. I mean, for most of his career, Eli Manning is like, he's in Brad Johnson territory in my mind. Like, if Asante Samuel catches that ball, it doesn't go through his hands, Eli Manning has as many Super Bowls as Brad Johnson. And the argument is who's better, Brad Johnson or Eli Manning, right? So I agree. If his name was Eli Johnson, I 100% agree. I think the nepotism is a part of this for sure.
Yeah, that's true. So speaking of older quarterbacks, we had this question earlier. Where did Drew Brees, Rivers, and Tom Brady go from here? They're all free agents. Philip Rivers moved to Miami, or not Miami, in the Florida. I think that was the big news that happened this week with Rivers. So kind of. I think it can be you can't overstate how difficult it must be to move. Like, what does he have, like 90 kids? Like, it must have been like quite the challenge for him to move across the country. And then also you have Brees and Brady, 2 40-year-old quarterbacks who are going to hit the market. So what do you guys think about this question?
I am thinking that of these quarterbacks, I think Drew Brees is most likely to stay put. I think that they'll give him another year in New Orleans if he doesn't want to retire. Bring back Taysom Hill as the backup, and probably have to let Teddy Bridgewater go. But they'll let Hill learn for another year under Brees, kind of improve his passing more. But Hill looks like the next guy there in New Orleans. I'm intrigued to see how he continues to develop. I don't know. I think he's on the older side because he went to BYU, but he's still like 30 and hasn't taken a ton of hits in his career. So I think Brees will be there with Hill. Rivers, since he moved to Florida, I think Tampa Bay Bucks are absolutely in play here. Bruce Arians did not sound enthused about Jameis Winston after the season. I think he loves Winston's talent, but that, the propensity to turn the ball over is just too crushing for that team. And that team has almost all of the weapons they need to win on offense. They just need to find a, running back who can play well. So I think you put Rivers there, and if that offensive line keeps playing well, that offense is going to start humming. And I know Rivers threw a lot of interceptions last year, but, he he was under a lot of pressure because their offensive line in Los Angeles or San Angeles or whatever we want to call it, that they're pretty terrible. Brady is the big wild card for me. I still think that he'll come back to New England. I just don't know how many really good situations are going to be out there for him that he may want to go to. I had thought that the 49ers would be a possibility if they didn't make a deep playoff run, but I think they're going to stick with Jimmy G because they made the Super Bowl. The Chargers may want to get Brady to sell tickets in their new stadium because they don't have fans in LA. People love celebrities. But I don't know if Brady would want to go there because their offensive line is so bad. The big threat that I wonder about to the Patriots is the Titans. After the fact that the Titans beat them and had that kind of crazy run to the title, Vrabel played with Brady. The Titans can keep building that team. They could sign Brady instead of Tannehill and, offer him more weapons, especially at tight end, than the Patriots have right now. But I still think that Kraft and Belichick are going to find a way to keep Brady and say that they'll invest a ton in offensive weapons for him as they gear up for like one last run together.
Yeah, I guess I'd be shocked if Brees and Brady are not back in the same places. You just mentioned it, Jacobs. I'm looking through the list of teams. Like, there doesn't seem to be any place where it would make sense for either one of them to want to go, right? I mean, I don't know. In my mind, every team that might want a quarterback still has a young guy that they're holding on to. I think of the Broncos. Like, I don't know, they just drafted a guy. I don't think he's good, but they're not going to go after a Brady. They're not going to do that, right? I mean, the Raiders, are they convinced on Carr? Could they get out of the contract? I mean, I'm looking down the list going, yeah, the Titans, are they just better off franchising Tannehill and maybe drafting a young guy? It feels like there's not really, the Buccaneers is the only spot. It feels like maybe one of these guys ends up. So it seems like it makes more sense for all parties, for all these guys to just stick where they are. Because there doesn't seem to be a really great location for any of them to move to. By the way, Jacob, you mentioned that Arian did not seem enthused about Jameis Winston. I mean, let's be honest. Would you be enthused about Jameis Winston if he was your quarterback?
I'd be enthused about the bright spots, but those massive down spots are just like, they're like massive face palms every 10 seconds. Like, he's going to have a great game this week. 5 interceptions.
He's the only quarterback I've ever watched that is so great, phenomenal at keeping both teams in the game. I mean, it's amazing.
You see, he's such a good fantasy quarterback for that reason. Like, he's going to always throw for so many yards, and I think that might be a reason why people overrate him. I wonder if the challenge in Tampa. So I think Rivers going to Tampa makes a lot of sense. I would assume that Arians would want him. I just wonder what Jason Licht is wondering. The general manager of the Buccaneers. Like, this guy is so stubborn and he's never willing to admit that he made a mistake. Kind of like a good example of this is that Donovan Smith, who's not a good left tackle. I assumed last offseason that they were just going to move on from Donovan Smith and try to find a new left tackle, and yet they gave him a massive contract because Jason Licht did not want to admit that he was wrong about Donovan Smith. And I wonder if they're going to do the same thing with Winston. Like, I think Arians will push for Rivers, and then Licht will be like, no, we're going to keep Winston. We're going to give him a big contract. And just look at all the touchdowns he scored. Look at all the yards he threw for. Like 5,100 yards is a lot. And Licht could say, like, oh, he's going to be a great quarterback, and then Arians is just going to like be pissed off. So I do think Rivers to Tampa makes a lot of sense. I just wonder if Licht is going to allow that to happen. If Tampa is not an option, I think Miami could make sense. Like, Ryan Fitzpatrick it's not going to be under contract, and like Fitzpatrick could come back. And it sounds like the Dolphins want to draft Tua Tagovailoa, but Tua's probably not going to be able to play next year, or at least to start the year. And I think it makes sense to like get Rivers on for one season. The Dolphins have talent at receiver. They have Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. I also like Albert Wilson. Mike Gesicki, who's coming on at the end of last year. They have 3 first-round picks. So they can draft a left tackle, and then DeAndre Swift, the top running back. They have 2 second-round picks as well. So this Dolphin team, is suddenly looking pretty promising. If I'm Rivers and I can't go to Tampa and throw to like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I'm thinking hard about Miami. I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, I could definitely see Miami being the fit. I think they do end up drafting Tua one way or another. They may have to trade up. I think that if they trade up, the Lions might be willing to move down a couple spots because if the draft goes Burrow and Chase Young like we're currently expecting it to, nothing is locked in, but those seem to be heavily favored right now. The Lions can trade down and still get a big defensive player like Derek Brown, Jeff Okudah, or Isaiah, the Clemson dude, Isaiah Simmons, I think. Yeah, thanks. So I could easily see them getting Tua. And Rivers would be a great mentor for him. So I'd like to see that. If you want my useless quarterback prediction right now, that one that you're going to be like, why do you even have this prediction? I think the Chicago Bears are going to sign Case Keenum.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That just makes too much sense because they've got they got Pat Shurmur. Case Keenum had his best year under Pat Shurmur, and they need someone to compete with Trubisky, but they're not in the market for a big name at quarterback. So Case Keenum, former Washington Redskin to the Bears. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I do have one. I think it's most likely the Bears suck. All right, Bears fans. Sorry, I went to college in Illinois. So I have like a lot of friends that are Bears fans. I have a cool question. I think it's against. I think that it's highly likely all three of these guys end up back where they are. Brees and Brady for sure. In my mind, I think highly unlikely they get away. Rivers either back with the Chargers or maybe with one of the Florida teams. But the dark horse candidate, I'd love to get what you guys think. The one team that I think is a dark horse candidate to maybe get in the mix, and they could make them a Super Bowl contender, especially if they were to decide Drew Brees. What about the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. That's a great call on your part. I think that makes a lot of sense for Brady. Like not only do the Colts have a great offensive line, like one of the best offensive lines in the NFL? And not only do they have like T.Y. Hilton and some, they have Jack Doyle as a solid tight end, and Paris Campbell, I think, is going to be a good receiver. Marlon back in the backfield. So, and plus a good defense. Like they have a lot of tools, and all they need is a quarterback. Jacoby Brissett's okay, but they need an upgrade. So the one appealing thing here for Brady is that he can go to Indianapolis where Peyton Manning played. And I know they're like Manning's retired. So not like really rivals anymore, but I still think that Brady would like to stick it to Manning one last time. And if he could win with the Colts and have as many Super Bowl rings with the Colts as Manning had, I think that would be very appealing to Tom Brady.
I could absolutely see that. That would be a really fun storyline to follow, even as a New England fan who doesn't really want to see Tom Brady leave. I think that would be a fun place for him to end up. And then, what the Colts can do, they could draft someone to develop behind Brady and try to trade Jacoby Brissett back to New England because Belichick may like Brissett enough to get him. The reason they really traded him in the first place in that Philip Dorsett trade was because they had Brady and Garoppolo and they couldn't really keep three quarterbacks on the roster. But Bill Parcells really liked Jacoby Brissett. I know he wasn't great last year by any stretch, but he was better before he got hurt. So that could be an interesting shakeup. I definitely think the Colts could be in this QB market, though, Kenny. That's a really good call because they still have a ton of cap space, I think, too. So they'll be able to spend up if they need to.
Yeah. By the way, I would root against them in that case because I love Frank Wright, but I don't want to see Frank Wright and Tom Brady together. Come on, man. Come on. It's the evil empire, man. It's Darth Vader or Anakin becoming Darth Vader. I can't have that.
That's fair. That's fair.
That did turn into 3 good movies before they ruined the franchise this decade, unfortunately. So we had this question, how about Bridgewater to the Bears? So Bridgewater is another quarterback who's going to be in the market. Charlie Campbell in our Senior Bowl rumor mill today actually wrote up that he's talking to teams, and teams anticipate like a big market for Teddy Bridgewater after what Bridgewater did this season. And Bridgewater beat up on the Bears. So that maybe the Bears, if they don't go after Keenum, maybe this is one home for Bridgewater because maybe they were impressed by him or something. So thoughts on where Bridgewater can end up?
Yeah, I think the Bears would probably offer him the easiest path to a starting job. So I definitely like that fit. And, he'd be the perfect guy if Mitch Trubisky continues to struggle. You throw him Bridgewater, he's still young, he can still develop. And, if he plays like he did for the Saints and just manages the game well and starts to show some improvement, I think he'll be good in that regard. And at the very least, he's the best quarterback against the spread that I've ever seen. So I would like to have him in the starting role for that reason. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of another place that would offer him an immediate starting job. because, the other top teams in the draft would be going after, top quarterbacks. I mean, maybe he would go to the Patriots if Brady left. Maybe he would go to the Colts if they wanted to move on from Brissett and like Bridgewater's skill set enough. But I do think there will be a good market for him, and I like his fit with the Bears a lot.
Yeah, if I'm Teddy Bridgewater, do I want to go to the Bears though? Like the defense was good, but not like I think this year it wasn't as good as people thought. Maybe the offensive weapons are like you got Allen Robinson, like you got a running back. Like I don't know that I love the situation. Like I know the coach is all people. He's brilliant. Blah blah blah. He invented football. Blah blah blah. Whatever. I don't know. If I'm Bridgewater, I don't know that I love that combo, but it's not like there's not like a great place, as you said, Jake. If Rivers goes to one of the Florida teams, maybe if I'm Bridgewater, maybe the Chargers make sense. Maybe there. I don't know what's going to happen with Melly Gordon in the offseason. So I don't know if that's a great option either. If you're Teddy Bridgewater, you're getting up there in years now, right? And you kind of like your next team is maybe like your last chance to be a starter before you become the perennial, just kind of bounce around as a clipboard holder, before you become the Josh McCown kind of guy. So yeah, like, I don't know. I feel for him. I don't know that there's a really great spot unless, cause if you're a team that's a Super Bowl contender, like if you're the Colts, do you really like, is Bridgewater really the guy you want? Like over Brissett? Like maybe he's better than Brissett, but is he that much better than Brissett that, you think you're going to make the splash if you're the Colts, then you go after the Brady. So I feel bad for Teddy Bridgewater. I feel like he's kind of in a tough spot because whoever misses out on Brady, Rivers, and Brees, those are the guys who are going to go after Bridgewater. He's kind of the second tier in this market right now.
Yeah, totally. I think that two teams come to mind. One is the Chargers. If they don't get Brady, kind of like what they want, like you were talking about, Kenny. If they struck out with the three big guys and Rivers leaves permanently, they're going to need a quarterback unless they use, the sixth pick in the draft on a quarterback, which maybe they could do, maybe on Justin Herbert, if they like him enough. But maybe they'll decide that Herbert's not ready to play, or maybe they don't even like Herbert and they won't take him. So if they don't get one of the three guys, I think they could go after Bridgewater. If the Bears don't get him, I'm assuming that the Bears don't get him in this scenario because we already talked about it. The second team that I could see is, and I guess something has to happen here, is the Steelers. So Ben Roethlisberger is getting up there in years. He missed all of last year except for 2 games. And he's talked about retirement before. Maybe he calls it quits this offseason, or maybe the Steelers have no faith in his ability to stay healthy. If so, they're going to need a quarterback, and they don't have a first-round pick. So it's like, how are they going to get a quarterback? So I think Bridgewater would be live to Pittsburgh too.
Yeah, I like his fit in Pittsburgh too. I think this is just such an unfortunate offseason for Bridgewater to be a free agent because we've never seen a free agent quarterback class like this. Like he's got like so many future Hall of Famers or Hall of Fame candidates in front of him and some other, suitable backups on the market but like any other offseason where it'd be like, oh, Teddy Bridgewater's a free agent, we'd be talking about like, oh, all these teams that could use a quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater is out there. And we saw it a couple years ago when he signed with the Jets and then was traded to the Saints, that he was kind of a hot commodity then. And now it's kind of like he's an afterthought with the top guys. So I feel pretty bad for him. But I think I like the fit with the Chargers a lot if Rivers leaves. I could see him being, no pun intended, a bridge quarterback there if they draft a Herbert, or if there is a quarterback with the last name Waters in this class and they got Bridgewater and Waters, that would be pretty cool. But I don't think there is. So there we go.
Remember a couple of off seasons? I mean, not too long ago, Kirk Cousins signed a $60 million fully guaranteed or whatever, or more than that, whatever it was, deal, obnoxious contract he got. I mean, am I crazy? When I watched Teddy Bridgewater play this year, and I watched Kirk Cousins play when he was with the Redskins before he was a free agent, I don't think there's a major drop off from Cousins to Bridgewater. Like, Cousins had a really good year this year. Probably had probably the best year of his career. But like, I don't know, like what Cousins got when he was a free agent and what Bridgewater is likely to get there's this massive chasm. but in the production that a team would get doesn't seem to me all that different, right?
No, it doesn't, and it kind of makes you wonder if what the Vikings will be like if they kept Bridgewater. And they're in a precarious situation this offseason. Like they're going to have to let go of some players because of Cousins' contract. Like talking about like Stephon Diggs might be leaving, Linval Joseph, Riley, the left tackle. Like they're probably going to have to cut several players this offseason because of the Cousins contract. Whereas if they kept Bridgewater for cheaper, they wouldn't have this issue. And plus, I think they'd be in a better position quarterback wise with Bridgewater. So it kind of goes to show that, you can make a huge mistake and it'll really hurt you in the future. So there are a lot of good quarterbacks available this offseason. And, the teams that don't end up with one of the top guys might be making a big mistake with one of the lesser guys as well, because they might be in panic mode. Like I can see the Chargers making like a huge mistake, kind of like that. So TJ is ES Eli retired from the Giants. Could he start with a different team? Eli, we talked about how Eli's going to announce his retirement on Friday. So definitely rewind that. So we have a couple of other stories to get to before we sign off. One is Antonio Brown. So he's had his issues. Obviously, everyone saw him with the camera on, I believe it was like on Instagram, where he was yelling at the police officers, and then he locked himself in his house. There's kind of like this battery charge going against him. So it sounds repetitive to kind of talk about Brown, but I feel like we have to maybe one last time. So hopefully one last time. So what do you guys think about the situation?
I mean, it's just clear that he's not focused on, as much as he'll tweet about wanting to come back to the NFL, he's obviously not focused on it. He's probably not mentally well. And at this point, this has been like a year-long spiral since he demanded the trade away from the Steelers. And we're just seeing him continue to go down and down. And that video of him yelling at the police officer was very frightening, just because you see like what's going through this guy's head right now, that he needs to be doing this. And then he gets a battery charge, and he's got all sorts of charges against him. He really needs just to get some help. I don't think we're going to see him play football anytime soon, if ever again in the NFL. Just there's way too much risk with this right now. And I think it also speaks to when he was in Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin keeping him under control, and whatever he was able to do to keep Brown from having this type of spiral really flew under the radar, unless these issues cropped up really at the end of his time in Pittsburgh. But it's definitely not a good story, and I hope that Brown gets some sort of help, because it is not looking great for him right now.
You remember a couple months ago, the frozen feet from the cryogenic, that seemed like a ridiculous thing, but as ridiculous as it was, and like people talked about it for days, that seems so mild now. Like as we look back, like the absurdities of him like not showing up to a practice last year at the end of the season, and like some of the absurdities that have gone on with this guy before the Patriots signed him, but before all of that, like they seemed bad. They seem like they're elementary now compared to what. And I think you're. I mean, I think Walt, you said this a couple months ago, and I kind of pushed back on you. You were like, I think this guy has like mental illness issues, and I'm like, man, I don't know. That felt unfair. I don't know. I feel like history has proven you right. The last 4 months of history is like corroborated that your speculation is founded. I mean. You got to feel for the guy. Here's the thing. I will say this. I still think he's going to play at some point. I think someone's going to give him a chance. I don't know who, but we've just seen the NFL, right? Like players get so many chances when you're that good. And last time I checked, Antonio Brown was as good, if not better than anyone in the receiver position. Like he was still phenomenal last year, right? He was awesome. And he was awesome for one game with the Patriots this year, right? He is awesome still. I think there's going to be. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. I'm not a betting man these days, but I think there's. I don't know that this is the last time we've heard from Antonio Brown. I know that sounds absurd to some people, but I got a hunch that some team's going to sign him, and it's going to implode. It's going to be a disaster. But I don't think he's done in the NFL because he can catch, right?
Yeah, no, Kenny, you actually beat me to the punch here. I was going to ask both of you guys and then answer myself. Like, what is the percentage chance that he plays again? Like, so what do you guys think?
I was going to put it at probably like 5%. Kenny, you may have convinced me to raise it up to 10. Not that I don't agree necessarily with your point, but like I've been following the Antonio Brown saga stuff very closely because he was in New England, and like it just seems like there's a new issue cropping up every day. But like you said, NFL teams have taken chances on players in the past. I just don't know if they would go after a guy who has repeatedly shown like I want to come back, but then he does crazy stuff and then goes on Twitter tirades and then has battery charges against him. So I'll put it at 10% for now. But I am very interested to hear what you guys have to say.
I think it's like 40%. I think it's my guess.
Whoa.
I would say I think there's like a 40% chance. Because I think there's going to be some team that's like, I think we can do it. I could be wrong. I think it's that high. I'm thinking of the Dolphins. I think there are teams. I mean, the Seahawks, right? The Seahawks worked them out, or were considered. It was rumored.
The Saints, yeah.
The Saints worked them out, like, you know, and then he ripped them on Instagram, so they're clearly not going to sign him now. I wonder if someone brings him into training camp. I think I'd say 40%.
Okay, TJ says 3%. I'm going to be lower than all three of you guys. I am going to be at 0.5% that he plays again. So a 1 in 200 chance that Antonio Brown plays again. So if I'm Rick Sanchez and I have access to different realities, so in 200 parallel universes, there is one where Antonio Brown plays again. That's where I'm going with this. For those of you who watch Rick and Morty, so I just don't see it. Like, this guy he has met, like, and I didn't say this like jokingly, like. I really do think he has mental issues, and it's sad, like, to see him deteriorate like this. And it seems like something new all the time. Like, Kenny, I forgot about the frozen feet, like that. That's just like that blows my mind. I completely forgot about it. And like, he's had so many things. Like, it's not just one or two things. It's like every week or every other week, there's something new with him. And I don't think it's going to end well. Like, sadly, like I hope I'm wrong, but like. I really think there's something wrong with him, and I think it stems from the Vontaze Burfict hit, because he hasn't been the same since. I think, and like, people talk about how he needs like mental counseling, and like I do think like that's part of it, but I think he's just so far gone beyond that. I don't think there's any helping him at this point, and I just worry about like what's gonna happen. Like I think something tragic is gonna happen. Like, sadly, I'm not even joking. Like, I really do think something's gonna happen. I just don't see him playing again. For him to play again, he would need to go to counseling. He would need to show remorse for what he did. He would need to stay out of trouble. I don't think any of that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Sorry, Jake.
No. You go.
Okay, I'm lowering it 25%.
All right, now I'm cutting mine back in half, 5%.
Okay. Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't really see it. Tony asks, who's the third guy? Is that Charlie Campbell? I don't know who the third guy is out of you two.
I think it's Kenny, because Tony really doesn't like Bill O'Brien. He comments on our
right. Yeah, you're right. That's Kenny Ortiz, the vice president at Fantasy Jabber. We do a fantasy football podcast every Wednesday. So check that out during the year.
Come on, Tony. DFS, bro. Come on, Tony. Get on it.
Exactly. That says hopefully not the Delonte West situation. What happened there? I saw him trending.
Yeah, so I forget if it was yesterday or the day before. A video was taken of Delonte West, and he was just kind of cuffed. He was handcuffed by an officer in the street, and he was kind of ranting like crazy about a man who had come to attack him with a gun, but his story was just like completely scrambled. And West has had mental health issues in the past. I don't know exactly what he has, but he's dealt with a lot of stuff of that ilk. So I'm hoping that he's in the process of getting help. I know his college teammate Jameer Nelson and his former coach at St. Joe's are working with them in the NBA PA. So yeah, he's dealing with some mental health issues right now. So hopefully he can get back on track.
Ugh. I love that St. Joe's squad, man. Yeah. Best of luck to Delonte West. Yeah, man.
Yeah, that was a great team for sure.
Yeah, he was a fun Celtic to watch always in the NBA. I enjoyed watching him play, so I hope he ends up being okay.
Yeah. Someone's asking who is Walter? I am Walter. WalterFootball.com. We have one final story. It kind of sad, but at the same time, we kind of celebrate his career as well. Luke Kuechly has retired from the NFL. Probably the best linebacker of our generation, I would say. He's outstanding to watch. Unfortunately, his career is cut a little bit short. He's had concussion issues in the past. I don't think he's had concussion problems in the past couple of years ever since he started wearing that neck brace. But I don't know everything about his medical history. Like maybe there's something else. Thoughts on his career? Obviously, Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, I would say he's a Hall of Famer in my book. I've been watching him since his freshman season at Boston College. Boston College is my I've been rooting for their football team since I've been a kid because my dad went to BC. He was in college the most unbelievable tackler you ever see. You go to a Boston College game and it'll be like every single tackle you'd hear like Luke Kuechly with the tackle on the play, and it translated so well to the NFL. He was so productive right away. He did everything. He was never an elite athlete, but his instincts were better than any linebacker I probably have ever seen. Him and Brian Urlacher are two of the best. Bobby Wagner is very good as well. I will give Bobby Wagner some credit there, where credit is due. But Kuechly just, he changed the game for the Panthers. He was the heart and soul of that Super Bowl defense. I'm sad to see him call it quits, but he had 8 terrific years in the NFL. He could have kept going if he wanted to. I can't blame him for hanging it up. He did have concussion issues, like you said. But I just, thanks, Luke Kuechly. It was really fun to watch you play. Probably the best linebacker I've ever seen play. And I wish you nothing but the best in retirement. And if you come into coaching, I have no doubt that you'll do well with that too.
I would say he's the second best linebacker, but really close. Urlacher is the guy I'd put at the top. So that's not a slight to Kuechly, obviously. When I look at Luke Kuechly, I think he's the opposite of Eli Manning in that, in my opinion, he definitely belongs in the Hall of Fame, but I'm not sure he's a shoe-in because of the short career. And we've seen that's been held against some guys. There are guys that maybe didn't play long enough, and so some of the voters, they seem to get annoyed by that for whatever reason. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be a factor. But in my opinion, and this is very subjective, he played long enough. He was so dominant. The difference between that defense with and without him was night and day. Like he was it was like a star quarterback going down for an offense, but on the defensive side. I mean, the guy was just so good. And man, yeah, you're right. I mean, he was so instinctive. He knew how to play the game well. I guess I was surprised. Has he talked at all? No, this guy Tony just says we're taking a slight at Ray Lewis. Okay, you're right. Ray Lewis belongs in the conversation too. Sorry. Anyway,
well, real fast, because I said Kuechly is the best linebacker of this generation. I kind of meant this decade. Obviously, Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher in the last decade were just amazing.
Yeah.
But I think this. I meant this decade. Like I would put Kuechly number one, but like last decade, definitely Lewis and Urlacher.
Yeah, and then I said in my lifetime, and Lewis, I definitely gave a slight to Ray Lewis. I apologize there, Tony. Good call. Yeah, but I think those three. I mean, Patrick Willis is really good, but I think it's a significant gap between Willis and those guys. And so, yeah, has he mentioned, by the way, has Luke Kuechly had a press conference, or has he given a statement? Has he given a reason for this? I mean, I know we can speculate on the injuries and stuff, but has there been any explanation?
I believe in his video tribute from the Panthers, or his video announcement, he just said that it's the right time for him to step away. And I think he mentioned that his body is saying that he should step away. So I think it was sort of a reference to the nagging injuries and concussion stuff. But he never fully came out and said, I retired because of this.
Yeah. People were asking, what about Eli? We talked about that earlier. I do think Luke Kuechly will be in the Hall of Fame. Actually, I kind of expect him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, honestly,
Wow.
I mean, he was drafted in 2012, so he played 8 years.
8 years.
I think that's definitely enough. It wasn't like a 5-year career or anything. Like, he was the best player at his position. In like what, six out of those 8 years. Like, I mean, he's just fantastic, and he's definitely going to be missed, definitely by the Panthers fans. And I like, the Panthers might lose Cam Newton this offseason. They lost Ron Rivera. They lost Luke Kuechly. The Panthers might be the worst team in the NFL. I feel like.
And the city of Charlotte also lost Kemba, so they're really reeling down there in terms of guys that, as someone who lived in Charlotte. Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me to see the Panthers end up with the number 1 overall pick next year if they don't address quarterback and fix the, hole at linebacker now.
Yeah, it's like, when the news talked about like Cam Newton leaving, I was like, at least they have a good defense. Like, they have K'Wan Short. He missed most of this year, but he's going to come back. They have Luke Kuechly, but now they don't have Luke Kuechly. And Jacob, we talked about like the DVOA at the end of the year, and I kind of like surprised you by the DVOA numbers. I was shocked by them as well. Whereas like the Panthers at one point were 5. What were they, like 5-3 at the time? They were like 28th in DVOA, and like we were both surprised by that, and yet they didn't win a single game afterward. They've lost 8. They lost 8 in a row to close out the year. I think you're right. I think they might have the first pick in the 2021 NFL draft. Which is going to be a good thing, because that's going to be Trevor Lawrence, and that's going to be their opportunity to rebound. So it's like bad times are coming for the Panthers in the near future, but in the NFL, you could turn things around very quickly. And if they get Trevor Lawrence, that's a good jumping point for them.
Definitely, especially where he's from, Clemson, which is not all that far from they're the Carolina Panthers. They're for both of the Carolinas, I always assume. So that would be a pretty big get for them if that does happen. But I am anticipating them to be bad this year. But growing pains, maybe they'll be better than next year.
Yeah. All right. One final question: in what years was Eli a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback? We kind of touched on that. Like, Kenny talked about it. At 2008, as Kenny said, I believe he had a great year in 2020 and 2012. Other than that, like his playoff performances, like, I don't think he was rarely a top 10 quarterback. Like, he, again, to not to kick a guy when he's down and he's like retiring, but like, I don't really see Eli as a Hall of Famer, but he will certainly get in because of his last name. But any final thoughts first, Jacob, then Kenny? Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I think I've given everything I have. I just love Luke Kuechly. That's how I'm going to close out this podcast. And thanks everyone for listening. This was a lot of fun to do a 3-man booth, and I think we did a better job than ESPN.
Who's the booger in this? Maybe I'm my booger. Anyway, I just want to sign off. I want a final sentiment just to remind everyone that the Chicago Bears traded up for Mitch Trubisky and passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. I just think that's valuable to note every week.
I think that's important to note as well. I can pretend to be Booker. Kenny just said that the Bears traded up for Mitchell Trubisky. So that's kind of my imitation of Booker McFarland, kind of repeating what just happened. Anything to plug from you guys?
I've got some stuff on free agents coming up on Rigo's Rag, my Redskins blog. Just some guys to target at linebacker. I'm going to work on that tonight and have it out tomorrow. Have some on receivers, tight ends, other positions too. So check that out. NBC Sports Boston. We are covering Patriots offseason stuff. Not a lot going on right now, but we have everything you need for Tom Brady. So check that out on site. We have a Brady Watch section. So head over there and follow me on Twitter at Jacob Kamiker. Always willing to talk football, talk picks, anything you want. Just tweet at me.
Sweet. Love that. I'm on Twitter too, at Fantasy Jabber. I'm not producing any content because I'm drinking a Corona Light. So they're not a sponsor of the podcast, but I recommend.
They could certainly be a sponsor of the podcast. Hopefully that will be the case. WalterFootball.com, plenty of NFL draft content because we are in we are starting to get in the peak of draft season with the Senior Bowl going on. Charlie is in Mobile, Alabama right now, doing some great reporting on the Senior Bowl. We have prospect meeting reports, so you can check out which Senior Bowl players have been meeting with which teams. Which is kind of important for the draft. And Charlie has daily NFL draft rumor mills. So kind of couple of items. Some teams are concerned about CeeDee Lamb's party lifestyle. CeeDee Lamb's probably going to be a top 15 pick, but they are concerned about his party lifestyle. And then Charlie also talked about where teams think that Jalen Hurts will be drafted. So check that out for sure. Someone's asking why is PFF grading Senior Bowl practices? I didn't know they were. I'm actually interested in checking them out. That's kind of interesting. That's actually pretty cool. I'm down for that. But anyway, WalterFootball.com, plenty of content. But I will talk to you guys next week.
All right, sounds good. Peace out.
You the man, gentlemen.
All right, bye guys.